people were coming and begging for food for their families, and it was just an awful scene. And what was really strange was that the supermarkets had food. People just couldn't afford it. This is my press pass from 1998 when I did bureau duty in Moscow for CBS Evening News. I was sent there for a couple of months. Boris Yeltsin was president, and it was a particularly important time in post-Soviet Russia because just a few months earlier, the economy had completely collapsed. The Russian ruble lost 2/3 of its value. It went from 6 to the US dollar to 18 to the US dollar, and it meant that people just didn't have the money to sustain themselves, and winter had set in. But the story was really outside of Moscow because Russia is really two countries, Moscow and the rest. And we drove to Kostroma, about 6 hours north of Moscow. It was winter, where the consequences of that economic collapse were so much more severe than they were in Moscow. We went to the local Red Cross and met some really wonderful people, I remember, who really were committed to trying to help people, but they didn't have the resources, they didn't have the supplies, and people were coming and begging for food for their families. And it was just an awful scene. And you have to remember, it is winter, it is cold. There's this image that captures just how cold it is, that we came across this wooden box in the town square with flowers in it and some candles. And I looked and I realized this was a flower seller, and she was using candles to keep the flowers warm enough that the freezing temperatures outside wouldn't kill them before she could sell them. But we then went on to a supermarket, which, to our surprise, was filled with food. But people didn't have any money to buy. And they were literally walking the aisles, looking at food, and leaving. While we were at the Red Cross, a woman came in asking for help, and we talked to her with our interpreter. She offered to take us to her very, very modest apartment, which was just 2 rooms, drafty, no heat, a simple element, no refrigerator. Showed us the larder, which had a couple of rotting potatoes and some potato skins for her dog, and that was it. Her daughter refused to come out to talk to us. She was embarrassed by the clothes she had, and it was wrenching. And when I asked her how she was going to make it through winter, she just shook her head and said she had no idea. Her husband was dead. The pension that she was due hadn't arrived for 4 months, and she had no money. And before we left, we just we were so devastated by this experience that my crew and I went into our own wallets and took some money out, some rubles, and put together a stash of rubles and some of the food that we had and went in and gave them to her. And she did not want to accept it, but we insisted. And I suppose I should have felt better, but I think that knowing the scale of the hunger at that time, the tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands who were in a similar situation, it was hard to feel good about what we'd done. I mean, we'd helped 2 people, and I am glad we did that. It's not usual as a reporter that you do that kind of thing. You can't change the world, with an action like that. And it's humbling when you see that kind of privation. It really is. As a reporter, you see wonderful things, but you see devastating things, and it really does give you a perspective on your worst day is better than a lot of other people's best day.